your biggest champion. You have to champion for yourself. Sometimes we feel like the people around us, because they love us, and yeah, they will step up for us, and we appreciate that and everything. But your self-worth is just that, self-worth. Stop trying to identify your self-worth through other people's eyes, through what other people can give you, through what other people say to you. That's not self-worth. You have to identify and feel your own self-worth first, right? If you're not being your own biggest champion in those moments, right, then when somebody is affecting your self-worth, you have not done the necessary work internally, right? Internally, to value your own self-worth, to have a worth of yourself. Again, it's called self-worth for a reason. Stop trying and looking for people to reaffirm or to determine your self-worth. Nobody can determine that for you. That's why it's literally in the title of the word self-worth. Okay, so I wanted to start this year off with the topic that is universal, right? It has nothing to do with being a creative, has nothing to do with, it's just a universal topic. And the thing that got me started on this is that very often you will hear people complain about people who don't respect their boundaries. And while, yes, sometimes you have assholes around you, sometimes you have narcissists around you, sometimes you have people who just ultimately don't deserve to be in your space, or users or things like that, and they do overstep those boundaries intentionally. You also have people who unintentionally will set boundaries just because you haven't set those boundaries and verbalized them very well. So I wanted to talk about it from this perspective, and to start the year off with protecting and enforcing your boundaries and why it's important, right? First, I think that when we all have boundaries, whether that be financial, whether that be physical, whether that be with our home, whether that be, financially, any boundaries that you have, healthy boundaries, are not at all wrong. So let's identify some types of boundaries. I want to start off there. First, physical. This refers to your physical space, right? Your personal space, your privacy, your body. And at the end of the day, like, some people, they have issues with displays of public affection, whatever it is, if you just don't like to be touched. So those physical boundaries. 2, sexual boundaries, right? These are expectations that you have concerning intimacy and the way that you touch and things like that. Intellectual boundaries that apply to your thoughts and beliefs. Those intellectual boundaries are just as important as anything else. Emotional boundaries. These are your feelings. These are you protecting your feelings and having the right to feel the way that you do. And then lastly, financial boundaries. And I think first identifying those types of boundaries, and I'm sure there's many more that people can list out as well, you have to first establish what those boundaries are, right? And, some things are very simple where it comes to like physical boundaries, alarm systems, stuff like that. So some boundaries are clear, right? Some boundaries promote that sense of security. Well, all boundaries in a way support that sense of security. And that's really what boundaries are all about. It's about you feeling secure in any of those things that we listed, and making sure that your mental and any other type of health in those areas is at the utmost of being protected by the people around you. Like I said, sometimes you get people that unintentionally overstep. You get people who intentionally step. You get users and things like that. So let's identify first the ways that we can set and maintain good and healthy boundaries. And the first one, the one that's always most important, is self-reflection. And, often we hear of things and we talk about things of people who talk to themselves, and we act like it's an issue, right? Sometimes, and if you're having deep conversations with yourself, that means that you trust your own judgment. So having some self-reflection, having time to really sit back and break down your own psychology, break down why you feel the way you do, why you need these boundaries the way that you need them. First, have that self-reflection. Very often we talk about boundaries and always about the other party. Healthy boundaries start within yourself. You have to identify those within yourself first. Second step, start small, right? You don't have to have the boundaries in place already. This is enforcing and setting up those boundaries, right? So it seems very overwhelming to set a bunch of boundaries in all these different areas all at once. Start slowly, right? Go at a pace that's comfortable to you. Like I said, that during that time of self-reflection, sometimes that will come around very naturally, and then you start seeing and having those ideas of how to protect those boundaries and keep them up. But first, start slow. Start slow, even if it's just if it's the way that somebody talks to you, if it's the way that somebody constantly relies on you and needs you in a way that you're like, hey, you're draining me in a way. Start slow with that, right? And then if you can, step 3 is set them early. Putting those boundaries up in pre-existing relationships. You have to It's really hard when you have a relationship and then all of a sudden you want to set a new boundary. Now you can, right? This is not to vilify or say that you should not set up boundaries even in older relationships. But if you can identify all these things first, this is why the self-reflection is the first step. As you build new relationships, as you build new businesses, as you have new people come into your life, it's easier to set those boundaries from the beginning because you have already taken the proper time to identify not only why you need the boundaries, but how you want those boundaries to go about. So that's important. Next one, be consistent. I can't stress this enough. The moment that you let somebody overstep a boundary and you don't call them out on it, right? And then, again, this is not always to say that it's intentional that somebody overstepped your boundary. You can reinforce a boundary in love, right? And you can do that in a loving way, but you have to be consistent and it avoids confusion for the other party, it avoids confusion for you, it helps them know your expectations of people who want to be in your life. If you be very consistent in those boundaries so often, right? And I can speak for myself, we allow people that we love because we love them, because we care about them, because we know that they care about us, to sometimes step in and over the boundaries that we need for our own happiness. And really all you're doing when you do that is you're setting yourself up, you're betraying yourself when you do things like that. So be very clear and be consistent in those boundaries that you need and explain to the people around you if they love you, right? And keep in mind, this will weed out a lot of people out of your life naturally, right? And sometimes you have to let those people go very well. But if somebody loves you, somebody cares about you and is genuine, and you have that conversation with them and talk to them about boundaries and you set up those healthy boundaries, if they really love you, they're going to respect it. They're going to do the best that they can to respect it. And if something's confusing, if they need reinforcement or if they need to be reminded, that's fine. Still do it in love. But very often, like we allow our own boundaries to be broken down under the guise of it being from a loving place. And really all you're doing is betraying yourself when you do that. Next step, create a framework, right? And this is dependent upon the type of relationship. And frameworks can be adapted depending on the type of relationship that you want. But again, create a framework. Make sure you get that alone time each week. And even like sometimes we have issues setting up boundaries with partners that we live with, right? With friends that we spend a lot of time with coworkers that we have to be with. You have to set up a framework. And that's regardless of anything else. That means that, hey, if you have that friend, that coworker that expects to have lunch with you every day and then they feel some type of way on a day that you don't, make sure you set that framework up to say, no, I really do enjoy my lunch with you, but there are times that I'm just going to want to be alone, or I have to run an errand, or I have to do this. You have to set that and not be afraid to really take that time out for yourself, even in loving relationships, in family dynamics, with your children, whatever else it is. Next one. Feel free to add extras, right? And that's something that we are very hesitant to do because we feel like we're doing the most when we do that sometimes. In every aspect of your life, even when boundaries are always in place, whether it be a workplace where they have boundaries in place, whether it be a relationship where you have boundaries in place, whatever else, whatever it is, it's okay to consider those boundaries the minimum and say that, hey, this may be the minimum of the boundaries, but guess what? There's a couple of extra things I need on top of that. Embrace those things, embrace those extras. Again, this is all comes back down to doing the things and making sure that your mental, your safety and your health in a lot of different ways is being respected. Next one, be aware of social media, right? We're so connected nowadays at all times, right? Between having easy access with text, between social media, and so often, right? It's a level of oversharing that happens, and it's hard to really control those boundaries when so much oversharing is happening and so much access is given to people. So be aware of what you share on social media. Be aware of how you use your social media, because again, in the way that you're using that, you may be unintentionally sending a message that you don't have a boundary that you actually do. And again, this is not to vilify, like, I want to make sure I'm not talking about like the women who men randomly send them things they shouldn't in the DM. No, because that's absolutely a boundary. You can post whatever you want, what you should be without having fear of that. But I'm just saying, like, be aware also of like the things that you say, the things that you do, not again to say that anything is necessarily wrong, but make sure that you're also voicing your boundaries in that, and that you're not allowing that social media aspect and that always connected aspect now of our lives to make it seem like you don't have boundaries where you do need those boundaries to be in. Next one, talk. Communication is the best way to set boundaries. especially if somebody is overstepping yours. You talk to them, you reinforce. Eventually, you need to also be comfortable with cutting people off, but keep talking, and make sure that in those discussions, right, you don't necessarily need to be confrontational. Setting boundaries doesn't have to be a confrontation. Setting boundaries doesn't have to be a negative thing. Again, if these people respect you like they say they do, if they love you like they say they do, they will absolutely respect it and understand it. But you have to continually talk and communicate. Communication is key. Communication with yourself, communication with others, that constant establishing, reestablishing, reaffirming, and everything else like that. You have to let people know. And you have to be comfortable with talking to people. If you have people in your life that you feel you can't talk to, especially when it comes to boundaries, those motherfuckers gotta go. You gotta be comfortable cutting people off if it comes down to it being about your happiness. And that is the key thing. You have to talk to people. Stop having people around you. Stop having people inside you. Stop being inside people in sexual manners if you can't fucking talk to them. Get a grip on that stuff. Talk. Next one. Be your biggest champion. You have to champion for yourself. Sometimes we feel like the people around us, because they love us, they will step up for us, and we appreciate that and everything. But your self-worth is just that, self-worth. Stop trying to identify your self-worth through other people's eyes, through what other people can give you, through what other people say to you. That's not self-worth. You have to identify and feel your own self-worth first, right? If you're not being your own biggest champion in those moments, right? Then when somebody is affecting your self-worth, you have not done the necessary work internally, right? Internally to value your own self-worth, to have a worth of yourself. Again, it's called self-worth for a reason. Stop trying and looking for people to reaffirm or to determine your self-worth. Nobody can determine that for you. That's why it's literally in the title of the word self-worth. So keep that in mind. Be your biggest champion. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for the things that you desire. Stand up for the things that you want. Again, this is all talking about healthy boundaries and healthy mindsets, right? Because some people do have this thing that they try to champion that's just not healthy for them or the people around them. But at the end of the day, when you have taken that time, like we talked about to begin with, when you've taken that time to communicate with yourself and identify and get in touch with yourself, you need to be your own biggest champion for the things that you desire, the things that you need, the things that you want in your life. You have to be your own biggest champion for those moments, because guess what? Nobody can invest in you more than what you should and can invest in yourself. Keep that in mind when you're looking for other people to try to determine your own self-worth. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Lastly, gain some perspective. Not having boundaries is detrimental to our mental health in every shape, form, or fashion. You have to have healthy thinking to help reaffirm and reestablish and strengthen those healthy boundaries. So first, you have to gain perspective, and that perspective first needs to come about yourself, right? First, gain perspective about yourself, then gain perspective about your situation, then gain perspective about the people who you deal with and that interact with and everything else. Once you gain those perspective on all those different areas, things become so much more easier for you to think about and enforce your own boundaries. We're naturally inquisitive people. Humans are naturally inquisitive. We have a need for information. This is part of the reason why social media is what it is. This is part of the reason why the internet exists. We have a need to be connected. We have a need for information. We have a need to constantly learn and grow. It's in you, whether you think you're doing it or not. But at the same time, all that without a perspective, without a healthy perspective and an outlook on it, you're just going to continually fail yourself. So keep that in mind. Gain that perspective. It's so important. I can't stress that enough, how important it is to gain some perspective. And that is the last step in these 10 steps. Gain that perspective over everything in your life. Take that time out to really gain a different perspective. Look at things from a different way. That takes a level of self-awareness, right? You have to be able to take a step back and look at all those things I mentioned, yourself, your situation, the people around you, what you want to do, everything. You have to take a look at that and be able to step back and look at it from a true and honest perspective point so that you can evaluate some things. And in evaluating those different things, you can see where you had yourself fucked up and you didn't enforce your boundaries where you needed to. You can look and see where other people had you fucked up, right? And then you can do what you need to do to either cut those people off or reestablish boundaries with them. And then you can see where you were just in a fucked up ass situation, and that situation needs to be eliminated, and you need to get yourself in a brand new situation to really change some things around you. So that is my 10 things on how we can not only establish, but reestablish and reaffirm our own boundaries in 2022. The last thing that I want to do and recap on this is it's important to recognize the boundaries of others, right? The way that I talked about this and the way that I framed this conversation was very much that there are some people who will overstep boundaries and they won't know it, right? It's easy to always think of and vilify people who step over your boundaries or whatever, or break down your boundaries, because it's not always intentional. But part of that is you also have to recognize the boundaries of others. You have to listen. Sometimes people aren't the best communicators. And yes, while it is up to them to communicate their boundaries, it is, as humans, as decent people, we can also recognize where people have some boundaries at, right? Even if they haven't verbalized it to us, and we can respect those unsaid boundaries just by viewing people. Again, this is all coming from the standpoint of it being people that we love or that love us. And if you love people, you should be able to, again, this goes back to the last point, to gain perspective. If you have a perspective on that person and a genuine one and a genuine desire to love them and to care about them and to be in their lives, you can start recognizing certain things where maybe, hey, maybe I am overstepping a boundary, or maybe they don't even realize it, but let me reel it back. If they need me back in, if they want me back in, they'll communicate that to me in their own way. And then I'll know, okay, I'm welcome to kind of be a part of this boundary. So recognize the boundaries of others. That makes you a more emotionally and mentally aware person. And it can help you navigate life so much better if you can recognize other people's boundaries before they need to communicate it to you. This has been another episode of the Awaken Soul podcast, man. I know I came out the top deep and everything like that. We'll get back to more of the lighthearted stuff, more of the cultural stuff and things going on in the community and everything next week. But I really wanted to start off this year in a different way and give people a lot of things to think about. So for the viewers on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. Continue to support. I appreciate you guys, man. That's really it. If you want to follow the podcast, you can do so at Awaken Soul Pod. If you want to send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, theawakensoulpod@gmail.com. If you want to follow me personally, you can do so at CEO Haize. That's CEO Haize. If you want to leave us a voicemail, that can be done at 614-547-2039. We are the #1 podcast for the culture. And for this week, but not for the year, I'm out. I'll see you guys later. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.